This is the shorter video of what I stated, of where I'm going to question pertaining to Relisha Rudd's disappearance when it was reported March 2014 that the child was missing, despite her not showing up to school even longer around that time period, right? So I'm in question of a Gerald Wills. Who is he? I'm in question of a Edna Young. Who is she? She's supposedly Gerald Wills' mother, and yet she shares the same last name as Shamika Young, such as Shamika Young being the mother of Relisha Rudd, and she shares the same last name as Melissa Young, Relisha Rudd's grandmother, right? The name Young is there. So Gerald, I stated in my last video, whoever Edna Young is, if that's her real last name, and Gerald Wills is her real biological child, such as son, right? If that's the truth, and their last name is Young, despite his last name being Wills, he might have his father's last name, who knows, or somebody else's last name. But if that's true, that's to say that Gerald Wills and Shamika, Relisha Rudd's mother, are blood relatives or cousins or something. And I stated that. But I'm going to push that off to the side. I'm going to save that till later. But in me questioning about the young child's disappearance, I would love to know, and nobody would know, unless to say it was Andrea Tatum, the woman that was murdered by Khalil. See, all this supposedly has abduction, and supposedly Khalil Tatum was the individual police was scoping out if he had abducted, yes, Relisha Rudd, if that sort of thing went down. But Khalil Tatum was also married to Andrea Tatum, but he had been married to her for over 2 decades, which marks 20 years, right? I'm thinking 2 decades would equal to 20 years. I think I'm right about that. But they filed a divorce a month before or so Khalil Tatum killed Andrea Tatum. I would love to know why he killed her. But not only that, I would love to know why the child came up missing. But more than anything, him filing divorce, there has to be more to that, because once again, Gerald was in a relationship with Andrea during the time that Andrea was in a relationship with Khalil. They were in a love triangle mess or whatever with that even Gerald today will know about. But my prime question and point in this video is, how did Andrea herself, yes, Andrea Tatum, before and after she got her divorce from Khalil voluntarily, they both filed for divorce in the court of law. I'm trying to question, what did Andrea feel about Relisha? That has to be questioned. Listen to me when I say, it in fact has to be questioned that a child, and say a woman that is not the child's mother, and yet she lays up in bed with 2 individuals such as Gerald and Khalil, this Andrea I'm speaking on, it has to be questioned, how does that individual who is not a mother to that little girl but plays as a stepmother or something to her, despite whether or not the little girl was Khalil's child, she still would have played somewhat of a stepmother, godmother. If Khalil played as a godmother to Relisha, you still have to ask and question, how did Andrea feel about the little girl? That has to be questioned. Yes, it does. That's a scientific question right there. Yes, it is. How did Andrea Tatum, no one would know but her family members, and possibly Khalil himself, or maybe Gerald. Yes, Gerald, you need to come out and show your face sometime of the day and quit hiding wherever you at. Gerald Wills, to be specific. How did Andrea feel about this little girl? Because see, to be married for 2 decades is to say you've been married over 20 years, and then Andrea goes and she files a divorce with Khalil. She wanted to divorce him, right? As in leave him, right? She files it the month before he kills her. I'm thinking that my timing is off, but she did in fact file that divorce right before he killed her, which could be why he killed her. Who knows, right? But on top of that, there's a question of why did they file a divorce? despite them being in poverty or whatever else, right? But more so than anything, how did Andrea Tatum feel about that little girl? Relisha, how did Andrea Tatum feel about Relisha? And I'm asking this because if they were married that long, that's to say Relisha came after they was married and not before. Because to be married for 20 years and say Khalil was in and out of jail way before Relisha was born, and say if he's the father, I'm saying, if he was in and out of jail before the little girl was born, and then somewhere along the way after he's out of jail or something, the little girl hits the scene, Relisha herself, as in being born by ways of Shamika Young, the child's mother, that's to say that sort of thing possibly more than likely had to taken place during the time period of when Andrea was still married to Khalil Tatum. And if say Khalil was Relisha's father, the police never came out and stated such, and they're more than likely not going to, for whatever reason. If that was the truth and it came out later or something, I don't know. But I'm saying that more than likely would play a factor as well, as in the child disappearing, a disappearance. Would it or would it not? Because Gerald Wills wants to say out of his mouth, well, and he claims to act like he don't know nothing over there, and he could possibly even be Relisha Rudd's blood relative. Let me tell you. Yes, he could. That grown man over there, if his mother is named Edna Young and she's sharing the same last name as Relisha Rudd's mother and grandmother, Melissa Young and Shamika Young, then that's to say he could possibly be blood relatives. And I said that how many times? Relisha would in fact be his blood cousin or something. So going back to what I was saying, that sort of thing has to be questioned, because if you go off and you're a man and you with a woman, right? You're married to a woman that has a man such as Gerald on the side, but then you take the time to say, go off and get another woman pregnant, such as Shamika Young, Relisha's mother. That's to say, yes, you had to have did that while you were married to Andrea. So not only that, say you would have cheated on Andrea, or possibly she knew. We don't know, seeming she was into drugs. People that be on drugs let anything go, as in they don't care. Sometimes let stuff bypass their eyes, that sort of thing. But Andrea might have knew that Khalil cheated on her and had a baby, went off and got Shamika pregnant, right? Andrea might have knew, or she might not have not knew about Khalil went off and cheated on her with Shamika Young and got pregnant, and Shamika has a baby named Relisha Rudd. It's one or the two. How did Andrea feel if Andrea did find out that sort of thing happened? And that has to be questioned, because see, if a baby hits a scene and say she's a love child or a secret child, it's to know that information has to come out sooner or later, as it make its way through. Because even if Andrea was sitting around somewhere holding a conversation or even being around a little baby such as a Relisha, it's to know she might be looking in the child's eyes herself and recognizing that could in fact be her husband's child. Who wouldn't know that? Because all of us have ways and featurettes, yes, features and featurettes of our own parents, despite many of us not wanting to say or recognize ourselves. I'm thinking Andrea, if she was around that little girl a lot, because Andrea was around her own husband a lot, and 8 years is a long time to even be around a child, just enough for you to be an Andrea Tatum and look in the child's eyes, or even look at the child when the child was first born, or something around that, even if it was later. Because see, features and all that other stuff start to come out a little bit more when a child has progressed, as in gotten older. So even if Andrea was around the child for even a year, she would have started to pay attention and watch the demeanor of the child, how the child moved around, how the child interacted with Khalil, how they were all close, how Khalil possibly would have been mild in manner and interacting with that little girl when they possibly stood side by side, and even when they looked face to face, a wife such as Andrea Tatum would have knew or not if Khalil was the child's father. She would have had to, because there's no way that a grown man and a little child is going to interact that close and be around and giggling, and then say one individual such as a grown man smile, and then a little child smile, and then the wife not see that. And then they might say and talk and do certain things alike, such as finishing one another's sentences. People that sometimes are blood related and sometimes not blood related, are even husband and wife are known to do that, complete each other's sentences while they're talking. So it's been known that even children and their own fathers do that sort of thing. The more close they are, they finish each other's sentences, and even Andrea Tatum would have recognized that. And even Shamika Young herself, who ain't saying and don't want to say, would have recognized that. More so a wife would have recognized that. And even a GERALD, if he was around more than he's telling, would have recognized that as well. Because there's no way for a little girl to look just like a man and be around a man, and then the wife allow that sort of thing to bypass her eyes. In the back of her mind, trust and believe, especially a black wife, will sit there and question and analyze from top to bottom, could my husband have cheated on me at any time in this marriage and went off and made a baby by a crackhead on top of that, despite Andrea knowing, being, yes, she had a drug history and jail record at that. Andrea, the one that died by the hands of her husband and then was ex-husband. Why did he kill her? I would love to know. I think there was a little bit more to that than just, say Relisha going missing, and a little bit more to her being killed than just Andrea knowing something about Relisha being sex trafficked, despite Gerald Will saying that. Because Gerald Will, he kind of need to be quiet if he ain't gonna say nothing more. And yes, I'm sure he possibly would watch this video. He possibly would, because an individual like that will possibly want to go hide somewhere away from law enforcement and never say nothing else if they're deeply embedded in drug activity. So maybe he would, or maybe he wouldn't watch this video. But there has to be more reason of why even Andrea wanted to file divorce from Khalil Tatum, and them filing it together willingly and voluntarily. There's more to that than just a child supposedly sex trafficking. There has to be, dear GERALD, there has to be a lot more up under that divorce, and not just that. Just like it has to be much more why she in fact was killed, Andrea. Because see, look, a woman that gets involved in sex trafficking herself, and say a child goes disappearing, she possibly may or may not tell that sort of thing, because remember, she's into that herself. To sex traffic yourself and be involved in be involved in what could put you in jail, such as drug activity and sex trafficking, and you come out your mouth going to talk to law enforcement about where a child might be hidden somewhere or killed off by a man such as Khalil, it's to say you might try to do some type of deal with police, but that's to say you just made your hands dirty with police, FBI, and you're coming out saying, well, I think I know what Khalil could have did with her. Because why would some woman be involved in drugs and possibly prostitution herself, and then go tell the police what the man Khalil did with the child? Yes, that could possibly end up her being endangered and killed the way that she died. But more than anything, I'm thinking she wouldn't want to go to law enforcement with that sort of information. Because to be in drug activity and no law enforcement scopes out that sort of thing, is to know you're not going to want to get close to them if you're a crack addict. I'm saying, Andrea, if you're involved in drugs and then you say, well, I know what Khalil did. The only way you would do that is if you struck a deal with the police, say them allowing you to say get off or not serve some time if somewhere along the way they find drugs on you in a stop or something. People that do drugs try to stay away from law enforcement, which is so strange to me because I can't really see, I don't know why that is, I can't really see Andrea going and telling the woman that got killed by the hands of Khalil. I can't really see her running and going and tell law enforcement when that child went missing that Khalil went and sex trafficked her. I don't know why I can't see that. Because she was involved in illegal drugs herself, as well as possibly prostituting. Because to be that deep and have a desperate drug addiction is to say you're into that. And not only that, I'm thinking the only way you would want to do that, go tell police, is if you try to strike a deal with them. So even yourself wouldn't go to jail over some of your past criminal history and deeds pertaining to an old jail record. Andrea had a jail record. And more than likely was still getting high leading up to her death. So that's questionable, that part that I just stated. Would she want to have sat down with law enforcement and told them the bad deeds and seeds that even Khalil was planting with Relisha, as in putting possibly Relisha into sex trafficking? Well, Andrea would have did that, knowing that she had a criminal record, and she might have actually went back to jail and opening her mouth to law enforcement about that sort of thing. That has to be strung in as well. That has to be tied in as well. Because to have a criminal record and be placing yourself around police, FBI, and talking too much about somebody that you married to, and you done got a divorce to, or you're on the way to getting divorced or whatever, and say a child goes missing or something, and say you know something or something, I'm saying the wife, I don't think she would have worked with police on that. Unless she just had a complete hatred and animosity towards Khalil, then maybe she would. But she still would have had to been paranoid and question of could she even go to jail herself because of her past jail record. People like that get to thinking, well, if I get in on this, what is police going to try to tie me to? Because police have been known to do even that sort of thing, right? So I'm just saying, with people that use drugs, drug addicts, that's why they don't a lot of times want to get involved with the police. But George Wills did that, but not enough, which is why I question even him. But I just would love to know, I'm wondering, what did Andrea feel once again about that little girl? And then the little girl comes up missing, because I'm thinking some of these women become quite enraged when they find out that their husband was cheating on them with another woman, and possibly a full-blown crackhead, which Shamika was. And she still is today, more than likely, a crackhead, and then a baby done came. But I'm thinking, at what time, if say that was Khalil's child, Relisha, at what time of the day or possibly year would Andrea would have found out that sort of information? Could even that have pointed to them getting a divorce after being married for 22 decades? That's a long time to be married to somebody and then say want to file a divorce. I think something Relisha had to have something to do with that as well. And possibly her being the child of that grown man, Khalil Tatum. I'm suggesting even that could have been a possibility, and them wanting to file for divorce. No, wanting Andrea. She wanted to file divorce from Khalil and not the other way around. She wanted that. So that's to say that Andrea, in fact, felt some type of way about Khalil, had to want to, in fact, leave him. And that's why I question if that is the little girl's father, Relisha's father. Because once again, if you cheat on a man, that's for any woman to want to leave, even if she find out later in the game. Because remember, Relisha did hit the scene later on in the game. 8 years old, that's to say much later on in the game. And not only that, would a woman such as Andrea have hatred towards that little girl? Or was she loving on that little girl, Relisha? That makes you question, was she loving on a little girl or hating on a little girl? Or was she loving on the little girl when the father was around and hating the little girl when the father was out of the actual atmosphere? That sort of thing is questionable as well. How was Andrea's relationship with the little girl, Relisha? herself? How was Andrea's relationship? I'm going to leave you, the viewer, to question even yourself. How well did Andrea and Relisha get along? Because they had to have been around one another. Remember, the couple was married. Andrea and Khalil were married. And he spent a lot of time with that little girl. So that's to say, more than likely, Andrea could have as well. She could have too spent a lot of time with Relisha. That's not to say that Andrea would have did or done any. That's not to say Andrea would have did or done any harm to little Relisha. Andrea herself would. I don't think Andrea would have did any harm to little Relisha herself. I don't think that. But I'm questioning the actual relationship between those two individuals. Because sometimes a woman can be married to a man, and that could be the father of the child, and that woman sometimes can be jealous of that sort of thing. A grown Andrea possibly sometimes getting jealous of, say, a little girl spending a lot of time with a grown man that maybe she feel he looks like her, they look like each other, could he be the father? And not only that, that will make her question, did he cheat on me sometime in our relationship while we were married? So how would Andrea have felt about that? Could in fact lead to a dispute. Let me tell you, that right there could lead to a back and forth between a husband and wife and fighting. But I can't sense an Andrea wanting to get rid of a little girl because of something like that. I can't really sense that. But I could sense somewhat she possibly not liking the much time that the grown man was spending with the little girl. That sort of thing I'm saying. So I think that's all to be said for now. I'm going to make more Relisha RUDD videos. And thank you for calling me out in the comment section. You know who you are about trying to question even this mess. Because that's quite odd. That's quite odd for Andrea Tatum to be married to a Khalil Tatum while she's in a relationship with a Gerald Wills. He have a mother that has the same last name as Relisha's mother. And then the child and all this mess, she ends up going missing. So how well was Andrea getting along with not only Khalil himself, but how well was she getting along with, say, even the child? Was she hug and love on the child or something? I wonder. I in fact wonder. Because all this, in fact, this adds up to the resolution of even why they divorced in the first place. Where people claim not to know why they divorced. Why did Andrea and Khalil divorce? Well, I'm questioning that. So I think that's all to be said for now. This is a short video, 20 minutes. And I'll be back with more.